light within my heart, light within my thoughts, light within my words. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved, ever be. Life and quality of life is often defined by various people in terms of whether one's needs are met or unmet. I'm actually rather fond of Elaine de Beauport's definition within her book, Three Faces of Mind, as when she says that emotions are the mind's ability or inability to meet its needs, so that when your needs are met, you feel happy, and when your needs are not met, you feel angry or unhappy or sad or discouraged or something of that sort. The definition of need, though, has shifted radically over time. At one point in time, I was always told that the basic needs of life are food, clothing, and shelter. Clothing for everyone who doesn't live in tropic climates, I guess, because without some sort of clothing, the human body is just not equipped to live in Arctic climates, in colder climates, in more adversarial climates. And so there needed to be some kind of exterior protection added that other animals don't need. In more modern times, because of the way humanity has evolved its societies, we now have transportation, fuel, communication, things like that as well. Because in the present time, going one step further, it has become, the assumption is that everyone will participate in some way or another within an economic system. If that means traditional employment, however, technology has now decreed that in order to apply for a position of employment, you will have to have a computer. And so, which kind of reminds me of the time when I was trying to point out to someone that computers don't actually produce anything. And someone standing nearby very astutely responded, yes, they do. And I said, what is it that computers produce? They don't make clothing, they don't make food, and he said they produce dependency. And that I had to concede that computers produce a lot of dependency. In some ways, they make communication and organization of information and storage of information and transfer of information so much easier, and they can make so many systems so much more efficient as long as the computers are working properly, which of course they don't always do. But adding that to the list of what is required for life, it very much points in the direction of how humanity has redefined the needs of life, and how humanity has redefined the needs of life within particular places. That if you're in one place, you have to satisfy certain governmental systems. If you're in another place, you don't have to satisfy those systems. The thing to remember about governmental systems, of course, is that they're written by people. We have written them, we can rewrite them, we can change them, we can alter them, we can do whatever we need to do to make them serve the purpose of survival, which is the purpose that they were originally created to serve. Money was not created so that people would have something to serve. It wasn't because people needed a God to serve. I believe there is a divine embodiment of highest wisdom and greatest love, but I don't think it's about enslavement and service. I think it's about the sort of relationship that I have with my service dog and my emotional support dogs. We love each other, and because we love each other, we want each other to have the very best life experience that can be had, out of love, out of generosity, not out of requirement or demand or saying you will, but instead to say life is this incredible, amazing, magical thing, and we get to share it, and we get to create memories, and we get to do something within time that exists at no other time, that is so special, and that depends so much upon the consciousness of myself and my dogs, and in spite of not having a common language, to still be able to love each other and interact in mutually supportive ways, very much in symbiotic relationship. I provide what they cannot provide for themselves, and they provide what I cannot provide for myself. And I guess in a sense that makes us family. I just wish that I could establish a similar sort of effective exchange with other human beings. One of my favorite movies that I've watched many, many times over the years, and I'm trying to remember how long ago it was made. It was quite a long time ago, starring Rex Harrison, a movie called Dr. Dolittle. And there was a more modern remake of it, but it really didn't capture the magic and the meaning and the power of the original old movie. And so if you can tolerate watching old movies, I recommend it to absolutely everyone. But there's a wonderful scene in the movie where this woman has become very fond of the magical way that he interacts in relationship with every living thing that he encounters, every animal he can talk to, everything that happens. It's as if they're all one huge family, and it has so much love and so much respect and so much valuing of each other. And she wants to be close to this man because she loves everything about the magical way that he touches life and blesses it. And she asks if she can come along with him on his next journey, and he recognizes the emotional attachment that is formed, but he still hasn't figured it out for himself because he's so busy being in love with life all around him that he has never figured out how to relate to the duplicity of humanity. And in that sense, I can very much identify with him because in some ways I share things on the show, I share my experiences, and I share what I have learned about life from them. And for everything I've shared, and for the way people tell me I'm sharing words of wisdom, I still feel like I really don't understand humanity enough to interact with them and live with them. And that was kind of the challenge that Dr. Dolittle expressed to Emma Fairfax within the movie. That I'm very good with animals, but I'm not very good with people. I'm with animals I'm very good, but with people I'm just not very good. I've never figured out why. And the curious thing about the movie is that it doesn't answer that question. Emma doesn't give an answer, nobody gives an answer, and there's no indication that Dr. Dolittle ever finds the answer either. The wonderful thing as the movie ends is that people have finally realized how important this Dr. Dolittle, whom they don't understand and who doesn't understand them, in spite of that lack of understanding, how important he is to humanity's experience of life and how he needs to be supported and included, even without having a common understanding of how relationships are supposed to work. And so the movie ends with him returning to live among people, not because they understand him and not because he understands them, but because their dependency upon animals has placed them inescapably in symbiotic relationship. That the people are dependent upon animals and the animals are dependent upon people, and plants are dependent upon animals and animals are dependent upon plants. And humanity, as Dr. Dolittle observes, is an animal too. But with all of this interconnectedness and interdependentness, still with everything he knows and hundreds of animal languages and so forth, according to the premise of the movie, he still doesn't understand humanity. And I would have to say, I really don't understand humanity either. I observe things and I can tell, I can make comments about how I think it should be and how I try to make sense of it. But when it comes right down to it, why do people hurt people? And, well, I can say brokenness will always have a tendency to reproduce itself. It's not so much about the people themselves as about people either becoming or refusing to be carriers of brokenness. Whether you're going to pass that brokenness along to someone else, pass along that greed, that selfishness, that dishonesty, or whether you're going to say, no, I refuse to be part of the brokenness. I am choosing to be part of the healing. And it takes a lot of work and a lot of dedication to do that because there are so many people and so many systems going the other way. part of the way that has evolved into my conversation and thinking in the last year or so is where I find myself more and more often telling people, don't chase the categories. Get to know the people. If anything, this is a time that is placing upon humanity the imperative that we rediscover the truth and the value and the depth within each other, and that we don't look at each other as some sort of category. I'm just going to put a name across that group of people and call them a category of race, a category of religion, a category of something, and that really doesn't give us the helpful information we need to be able to collaborate and maintain that symbiotic relationship by which life will be the most that it possibly can be, and always evolving into even more. I don't know, well, of course, this physical body will not live to see that point, but I was kind of fascinated when I finally got to see the entire series of the television series of Babylon 5. There was one particular episode where the author of that story put forth the idea that given enough millions and millions and millions of years, humanity eventually could evolve to the point of becoming a being that is constituted entirely of energy, such that there would be no need any longer for any sort of predatory relationship, no need to consume anything, but simply to exist as eternal energy that can at will change itself back and forth between matter and energy, taking whatever form it needs to at whatever point in time, and shifting back into energy anytime it needed to go anywhere. And that energy being able to move and transform at the speed of thought. And basically making, in that sort of experience of life, there would literally be nothing that was impossible any longer. But the big question coming out of all of that is whether humanity has sufficient wisdom at the present time to have those capacities. At the present time, it would seem that humanity's collective understanding is so infantile. We are so at the beginning. It's as if humanity is still stumbling around in the dark. And like walking through a room in the dark and not being able to see where you're going, you might be knocking over tables and chairs and knocking vases off of shelves and breaking things, and stumbling into other people and tripping and falling on them and breaking them and damaging them. We're hurting each other and we're hurting everything around us because of the way we're stumbling through the dark, trying to feel our way and learn what we can so that we can shed some light on where we are and who we are and who and what is around us. As the world seems to be racing toward greed and narcissism and systems and categories, and all of that is so self-sabotaging when it is fully understood, that Dr. Dolittle understood that it comes back down to the relationships and loving and respecting each other and meeting each other's needs. That when a plow horse came to him complaining of not being able to plow straight rows in the field because he couldn't see, and Dr. Dolittle said, well, your eyesight is not what it should be. And he created glasses that the horse could wear, and then had the horse read off of an eye chart, and commended him for having such astonishingly good eyesight with the glasses that Dr. Dolittle had fashioned for him. Dr. Dolittle was able to understand the horse enough to figure out what the horse needed, and the horse was willing to, in exchange for that, provide services and create this bartering kind of symbiotic relationship. I think he says, as the horse is leaving, for his secretary, the parrot, to make a note that the horse would give them a ride to town at a certain occasion, or something like that. Everything can fit like the pieces of a jigsaw puzzle, but it requires love and it requires respect. Instead of trying to dominate and control each other, We have to take the time to get to know each other and figure out what is going on in the other person's life that needs to be addressed. And if it is happy or sad, to be with them in that experience, to celebrate when they celebrate, to grieve when they grieve, to mourn the passing of lives and friends, because physical bodies are not designed or equipped to live forever. I keep saying to my service dog, if love had anything to do with it, you would live as long as I do and we would die together. So that there would be no more goodbyes, no more how do I cope if, when your time is up. And yet on that note, I enjoyed the anecdote I read somewhere where some parents were trying to explain to a small child, maybe 4 or 5 years old, about the family dog being very old and having to be euthanized because his body was worn out and it was time for him to go back to heaven, or whatever metaphorical explanation parents want to offer. And they were surprised at how well the little boy took the news, and asked him to explain, well, isn't this something very difficult? I mean, we're all going to be sorry to see him go. And the little boy said, oh, yeah, of course. But if the reason we're here on earth is to learn how to love, dogs already know how to do that, so they don't have to stay as long. And what an amazing insight for a little boy to offer his parents about the purpose of life. That if the purpose of life is to learn how to love, then those who love most, according to the little boy's hypothesis, would not have to stay as long before they could go back to heaven, which is always described as being a far better place than where we're currently living. And yet, with all of the struggles and challenges here on earth, there is something about being able to experience the struggles and being able to work through things and being able to know what it is to hike up to the summit of a mountain, and to know what it is to weave the threads together into a blanket, or crochet an afghan, or to paint a picture, or to make a ceramic pot, and to look at it and go, wow, I made that. When I was weaving the string art of these symbolic windows behind me, that there was a simpleness to it. It's really nothing more than cords going back and forth between two fixed points. And yet by using enough points and by overlapping the colors and the threads in very particular ways, curves and shadings and all sorts of new dimensions are created. And to be in a place of such incredible creativity that I don't know how one would ever adequately count all the examples of creativity on the planet Earth. The number would be so amazingly infinite, from insects to plants to animals. How many examples of creativity are there on the planet? I don't know if there's a number to represent that. And so to be in this creative place is absolutely wonderful. All that being said, I don't have any argument that heaven is even a far better place. It's an entirely different context, and it's not about the wealth you have, it's about the person you become. And we become much more than we otherwise would when we are involved in, engaged in, embraced in a symbiotic relationship, where we are giving to something else that is giving to us, and it becomes a mutual kind of celebration of life. Even many years ago, in the Roman Catholic Church, growing up as a child, I still remember the priest talking about the definition of heaven and hell, and how they may in actuality not be as different as people think. That in hell there is a long banquet table set with wonderfully delicious food, and everybody sitting along in chairs on either side. But the quirk of it is in heaven it's the same thing, But the quirk of it is that there is a long wooden spoon tied to the arm of each person so that they cannot bend their elbow enough to bring the food to their mouths. And in hell, they sit there staring at each other while the food spoils, and this wooden spoon is tied to their arms so that they cannot bend their elbow. And in heaven, everybody is having a wonderful time because they are reaching across the table and feeding the person on the other side of the table. Symbiotic relationship. I didn't know what symbiosis was at the time, and I never heard the term symbiotic relationship. And I think if the priest had used the term, everybody in the church would have said, "Huh? What are you talking about?" Because it's not a commonly understood term, but it needs to be. The understanding that we make it heaven by taking care of each other rather than being most concerned with taking care of ourselves. Sisterhood is not like any other person on earth. I understand that. It is my soul, is what I believe I was born to do, and I am as dedicated as I can be to doing this work in a way that serves everyone else, that feeds the person across the table as much as I possibly can. The challenge that I continue to run into within this world, however, is when, during those times when the person on the other side of the table is not feeding me, and how long can I continue to feed them before I become too exhausted and too starved to lift my arm off the table anymore. Thankfully, we're not at that point, and I hope we never get to that point. There have been a number of very close calls in the last few years, though, and that's where, not so much for me as for anyone you value, anyone whose contribution nurtures you, to understand that it is this symbiotic relationship of everyone feeding the person on the other side of the table, and that if you want those people in your world, you need to do whatever is necessary to be sure that they have some place to call home, enough food to eat, enough clothing to wear, whatever tools they need to do whatever job it is that they do. If they are not supported by the others around them, they will not be able to do their work. And I look in the mirror sometimes and I have to wonder, how am I going to keep doing this work if there's no support coming back? And yet I don't want to spend any time doing scorekeeping. I don't want to worry about whether there's anything coming back. I want to be focused on giving, because in order to do my best work, that's where my focus needs to be. The more I have to take focus away from that and direct it toward my own survival, the more the work becomes compromised. I've often suggested that if anyone ever sets up a memorial stone for Sister Who after I'm gone, that the caption on it should read, "I would have done so much more if I hadn't spent so much time fighting for survival." And as an autistic man as well, that's a struggle that I would deal with on a daily basis. The world is predominantly neurotypical. I don't know what would happen if the world could survive with a world of predominantly autistic people, because there would be so much hypersensitivity and so much organization that needs to happen that we may even, in some ways it may be so hyper-organized it would be wonderful, and in other ways it would be so demanding because trying to tiptoe around everyone's hypersensitivities might be a bit too much. So if you'll indulge my personal belief choice in believing in a divine being that is the embodiment of highest wisdom and greatest love, that highest wisdom seems to have determined that approximately 2% of the world's population be autistic. Some people say that autism is the next phase of evolution and that at some point humanity will all be autistic, but if we get to that point, I hope we've learned how to handle it by the time we get there. In any case, 2% of the world's people are autistic. That seems to be enough for now. If we're integrated, if we love one another, if we live in symbiotic relationship, it will be a good thing for absolutely everyone. not just for the categories, but for everyone. May the power of love overcome the love of power as soon as possible. And with all of us working together, it really can happen. Thank you for watching.